Headlines. President Park Geun-hye appoints 5 of her cabinet nominees who were confirmed by Parliament last week, setting the groundwork for a reform drive spurred by the April ferry disaster. New Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan says no extra budget this year, but that he will push for other fiscal tools to boost the Korean economy. And the leaders of the 5 BRICS emerging market countries sign a deal to create a new development bank and an emergency reserve fund. Hello and welcome to ARIRANG News. Thanks for tuning in. We begin tonight with President Park Geun-hye's new cabinet. Certainly, there were hiccups along the way, with some nominees being dropped due to disputes over their credentials. But now, the president is hoping to get back to business. Our Choi Yoo-sun reports.
President Park Geun-hye has appointed 5 of her cabinet nominees who were confirmed by Parliament last week. Her spokesperson said the president appointed Choi Kyung-hwan as the new finance minister and deputy prime minister and Lee Byung-gi as the head of the National Intelligence Service on Tuesday. She also appointed Choi Yang-hee, Lee Ki-kwon, and Kim Hee-jung as the ministers of Science, Labor, and Gender Equality, respectively. And despite the parliament's disapproval, President Park went ahead and appointed Chung Jong-sub as the new security minister. The president, who retained the current prime minister after her 2 previous nominees stepped aside and who withdrew her nomination for education minister Tuesday, cannot afford further delays in handing over state affairs to a new cabinet. After dropping education minister designate Kim Myung-soo, who was grilled by parliament over allegations of thesis plagiarism, President Park quickly nominated Hwang Woo-yeol, her political aide and a prominent figure within the ruling party. Hwang is close to the president, and if confirmed by the National Assembly, he would join new Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan as the president's 2 deputy prime ministers, a move likely intended to expand cooperation with the parliament. Meeting with the ruling and opposition parties' leadership in recent days, President Park sought the parliament's cooperation on a series of bills to revitalize the economy and others to reform the government and public sector in the aftermath of April's ferry tragedy. Meanwhile, Culture Minister nominee Chung Sung-keun, who was not confirmed by the National Assembly, dropped his bid Wednesday morning. Choi Yoo-sun, ARIRANG News.
And in this next report, we zoom in on new Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan. On his first day at work, Minister Choi promised aggressive fiscal measures to boost the Korean economy. Na Hyun-kyung tells us more.
Low growth, a downsized economy in pursuit of better place, an absence of notable results. I think this is the reality we are faced with.
New Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan has made it clear that he will be proactive in his new role. In his inauguration speech Wednesday, Choi said passive macroeconomic policies have caused the Korean economy to slow down and have also resulted in less tax revenue. One of his plans to tackle those problems was to reform unnecessary restrictions that keep businesses from finding new investment opportunities.
When companies do well, they will, in return, create more jobs and up the earnings for households, which will spend more. We need to establish this virtuous cycle in order to strengthen domestic demand.
As he has long been hinting since being nominated, Choi reiterated plans to ease the debt-to-income and loan-to-value ratio regulations for mortgage loans to prop up the real estate market. Experts say the challenge will be doing so without drastically increasing already soaring household debt, on top of trying to boost consumer sentiment, which dipped after the April ferry disaster. Choi said the nation's growth outlook will have to be revised down and that an adjusted roadmap will have to be established, but added the ministry will not seek a supplementary budget this year. Na Hyun-kyung, ARIRANG News.
The June jobs numbers are out. The jobless rate came in at 3.5%, down from 3.6% in May. But the pace of job creation slowed compared to recent months. The number of the employed stood at a little less than 25.9 million, up close to 400,000 compared to the same month last year. This shows 4 straight months of monthly job growth on the decline. A new study suggests government support designed to get companies to invest more in research and development is having the desired effect. According to the Korea Institute of S&T Evaluation and Planning, when the Korean government increases its R&D budget by 1%, business enterprises increase their R&D investments by up to 0.2 percentage points within 2 years. The institute says government R&D also induces an increase in labor productivity, particularly among small and mid-sized companies. Korea has been pumping more and more money into R&D in recent years. This year's budget dedicated to R&D is $17 billion, up more than 4% on year. Korea's central banker agrees that regaining consumer sentiment is essential to stoking economic growth, but he cautioned against lowering interest rates, citing ballooning household debt as a major threat to the economy. Kim Young-gil has this report.
Mounting household debt, that's what Korea's central bank chief thinks is the biggest threat to Korea's economic health. Bank of Korea Governor Lee Ju-yeol expressed concern on Wednesday that household debt is rising at a faster rate than income growth, and that loan extensions are growing, particularly in non-banking institutions. Lee told an economic forum in Seoul that overall household debt is not expected to develop into a financial system failure, as high-income earners account for 70% of total household debt. But the low-income earners are having trouble paying off their bills. Those who spend more than 40% of their income servicing their debts accounted for 11% of debt holders last year, up from 9% from a year earlier. He was on same page with the new Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan that spurring consumer spending and corporate investment are the keys to bolstering growth. But he said lowering key interest rate leads to a rise in household debts, eventually hurting purchasing power. As for the overall economic outlook, he added that growth would recover in the third quarter of the year, but there were risks of lower than expected growth in view of the volatility of the Korean won and the lack of confidence among businessmen and consumers. The central bank lowered its economic growth last week by 0.2 percentage point to 3.8% for this year. Kim Young-gil, ARIRANG News.
The Brazil World Cup came to a close earlier this week with Germany taking home the trophy. But they were not the only ones happy with how the World Cup panned out. Korea's biggest tech firms saw their ultra-high definition TV sales go through the roof as fans bought new TVs to watch the matches. Samsung Electronics says its UHD TV sales in Korea doubled in June on month, and sales of curved UHD TVs grew at a similar rate. LG Electronics also says its sales nearly tripled in the second quarter compared to the first quarter. China's economic growth picked up speed in the second quarter of this year, indicating that the impact of the government's stimulus measures may be kicking in. Official data released Wednesday show that the country's GDP grew 7.5% on year during the April to June period. That's slightly higher than market expectations and a rise of 2 percentage points from the first quarter.
For the latest in news that impacts Korea and the world, join Kang Chae-ri for a lively half hour that covers politics, business, international news, and much more. Live at 8 every weeknight on ARIRANG TV.
Human Rights Council headquarters in Geneva on Thursday, finding ways to... The clock is ticking on the National Assembly to pass a special law aimed at uncovering the causes of April's deadly ferry disaster. With just 1 day left of a regular parliamentary session, lawmakers had hoped to come to an agreement Wednesday on the Sewol-ho ferry law. The two party leaders from the ruling and opposition parties met this afternoon but failed to narrow their differences so far. The main sticking point remains who will be allowed to take part in this investigation. The lack of progress is likely to further infuriate victims' families who called on lawmakers to adopt the law by the day's end. Talks continue at this hour and are expected to run throughout the night. South Korea and Japan relations have seen better days, of course. Years of conflicts over territorial and historical differences have driven a big wedge between the two, but new signs indicate that ties may be about to take a turn for the better. Hwang Sung-hee tells us more.
Top diplomats from South Korea and Japan may meet for talks next month on the sidelines of the ASEAN Regional Forum in Myanmar. Diplomatic sources in Seoul said Wednesday that such a meeting would be favorable, although nothing has been decided yet. If it happens, it would be the first talks between South Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se and his Japanese counterpart Fumio Kishida this year. The possibility will likely be discussed when the two countries resume their monthly meeting on the so-called Comfort Women issue in Seoul next week. It will be the first such talk since Japan carried out a review of the Kono Statement, its landmark apology to the victims of its wartime sexual enslavement, issued in 1993. A thick frost has settled over Seoul-Tokyo ties in recent years, stemming from historical controversies and Japan's territorial claims over Korea's Dokdo Island. But at the same time, Japan has made public its desire on numerous occasions to talk with South Korea, which may have put Seoul in a difficult position to repeatedly turn a cold shoulder. Washington may also be playing a part. The U.S. wants a firm trilateral security alliance with South Korea and Japan and has tried to end the squabble, especially as Tokyo appears to be cozying up with Pyongyang. To reaffirm their joint commitment in dealing with North Korea's nuclear program, the chief nuclear envoys from South Korea and Japan held talks in Tokyo on Wednesday. But whether the string of bilateral meetings will thaw years of icy relations remains in question. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
President Park Geun-hye has called on the country's military to strongly retaliate against any North Korean provocation. She made the direct appeal on this Wednesday at a luncheon with about 140 key commanders, including Defense Minister Han Min-gu. The president said North Korea's behavior had been unpredictable of late, ranging from plans to send athletes to the upcoming Asian Games in the South to artillery and missile firings. She said it was important to make clear to the North Korean leadership that there would be severe consequences for any type of attack, and added that she had the utmost confidence in the South Korean military to counter those threats. A growing number of college students are choosing to spend their summer breaks in Korea, not on vacation, but to shore up their academic credentials. They're taking advantage of Korean universities that offer summer courses, and they're gaining a better understanding of Korea in the process as well. Shin Se-min tells us more.
Socializing with Korean students and immersing themselves in cultural activities. Students from over a dozen different countries gather at a Korean campus. They are taking part in an international summer course program for students and professors that a growing number of private universities in Korea provide.
With nearly 100,000 international students currently residing in the nation, more colleges are designing programs and scholarship opportunities in hopes of bringing the world to Korea.
To differentiate their experiences while spending the summer in Korea, universities have expanded the number of science and technology-related courses, which is something students expect due to Korea's tech-heavy reputation. Universities also send students outside the classroom and into internships at Korean-based companies, organizations, and even broadcasting stations. The opportunity to spend a summer overseas while adding college credits isn't reserved for those with money readily available.
As a non-profit organization, we, the university, have the obligation to foster young students regardless of their background. So we try to broaden our view by inviting students from developing countries and eventually letting globalization work on our campus.
Great benefit for us because we get to come here with the scholarship so that we can have a good opportunity to stay here, like learn about new things of Korea people.
Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Korean dramas and Korean pop music have made a name for themselves on the global stage in recent years. Is Korean fashion next? Those taking part in the country's largest fashion trade show certainly think so. Our Park Geun-hye was there.
The next global trend to come out of Korea is believed to be K-fashion, following in K-pop's footsteps. This show is part of Korea's biggest fashion business market and trade fair, which aims to help the country's up-and-coming designers venture into the overseas market. EXO, one of the hottest K-pop idol groups around, attended the opening to boost exposure of K-fashion.
For designers, trade shows like this are considered the first step towards presenting their works on runways at major collections around the world.
That's why young Korean designers like Kim Hee-jin participate in the fair, hoping it leads to lucrative opportunities.
In just a couple of hours, I was approached by foreign buyers from China and Italy. They said they like my designs and it seems like contracts will soon follow.
Influential foreign buyers think Korean designs have what it takes to thrive on the global market.
Back to basics in the colors and in the fabrics, but with this extreme cure about details. So everything that reminds me about a little bit like Rick Owens, Gareth Pog.
Over 120 brands and designers participate in the three-day event, which acts as a sneak preview for some of the trends that may reappear during Seoul Fashion Week in October. Park Geun-hye, ARIRANG News.
Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has been sworn in for a new 7-year term as the country's bloody civil war enters its 4th year now. For more on this story, Paul E. is joining us from the News Center. Paul, many of Assad's opponents at home and abroad slammed this election as a farce. What does he hope to accomplish over the next term in office?
Well, Assad has told supporters that his re-election marked a victory in an ongoing revolution, reaffirming his grip on power in the government. On the international front, experts say he'll try to take advantage of the West's fear of Islamic extremism, especially with the rise of the militant group ISIL in Iraq. Assad was sworn in before parliament in an extraordinary session in Damascus on Wednesday. Assad won the June 3rd poll in a landslide. However, controversy erupted when polling stations were only held in regime-controlled areas, and the other two candidates had been pre-approved by his administration. The conflict in Syria, which has raged on for over 40 months, has killed more than 170,000 people.
Now, a little closer to home, a massive typhoon is battering the Philippines, forcing tens of thousands of people to evacuate, to flee their homes in the wake of one of the worst storms to hit the country. Give us the damage report.
The torrential rains and fierce winds have all but shut down Manila as Typhoon Ramasan passed through the region after cutting a path across the main island. At least 13 people have been killed and over 370,000 residents ordered to evacuate to shelters. According to the National Disaster Management Council, many of the fatalities were people who died after being hit by falling trees, power lines, and buildings. Widespread blackouts have also been reported, with millions of households still without electricity. The Philippine Red Cross said effective preparations and greater public cooperation with the government helped to reduce the number of casualties and damage.
Cleanup operations would be number one. Restoration of some facilities would be a priority likewise. Plus evaluating and looking at lessons learned here.
Around 20 major storms pass over the Philippines each year. The Tropical Storm Risk Agency predicts the typhoon, also known as Glenda, will gain strength to a Category 3 storm over the next couple days once it heads back to sea before heading to China.
And in other stories, the leaders of the BRICS group of emerging economic powers have agreed to set up a new development bank with an initial capitalization of $100 billion US. What kind of impact is this agreement going to have?
Well, analysts say it could radically overhaul the existing global financial order. The BRICS nations are forging a multi-billion-dollar alliance, agreeing to establish a development bank that they hope will rival Western-dominated institutions like the IMF and World Bank. Our Connie Kim reports.
The leaders of the 5 BRICS nations have signed a deal to launch a $100 billion development bank and a currency reserve pool with the aim of challenging Western-dominated institutions like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund.
This will not only help increase the voice of BRICS nations in terms of international finance, but more importantly will bring benefits to all the people in the BRICS countries and for all people in developing countries.
The new development bank, announced at the 6th BRICS Summit in Fortaleza, Brazil on Tuesday, will fund infrastructure projects in the founding members, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, as well as other developing nations. With its headquarters in Shanghai and India as president the first year, the bank will start out with $50 billion in capital, with each BRICS country paying in an equal amount. Total capital is expected to eventually double to $100 billion. A so-called contingent reserve arrangement will also be created where each country will put in a designated amount in case of a currency crisis. The contingency fund will amount to $100 billion, with China contributing $41 billion, followed by Brazil, Russia, and India putting in $18 billion each, and South Africa chipping in $5 billion. BRICS represents about 42% of the world's population and accounts for roughly 1/5 of the world economy. The launch of the institution is being seen as a landmark achievement as the 5 countries started summit talks in 2009 to counter the influence of the West. If everything goes according to plan, the new development bank will start lending in 2016. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
And former U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is on a media tour in the U.S. to promote her new book. But the new book is not all she talked about, was it, on The Daily Show? Paul, fill us in.
Well, Hillary Clinton went on head-to-head against host Jon Stewart, exchanging laughs and even discussing what role the U.S. should play in the world. The former First Lady appeared Tuesday night on the American program, which is famous for its comedic political satire. She refused to say whether she would be a candidate in the 2016 presidential election, but indulged Stewart in taking his questions on his so-called career aptitude test.
Do you have a favorite shape for that home office? Do you like it? Would you like to have corners, or would you like it not to have corners? I don't know.
Even though she is not officially a candidate, Clinton has already been attacked by conservative U.S. politicians and pundits. Clinton added that the U.S. is a great country, but hasn't done a good job at pointing out its advantages to the rest of the world. Chetty?
All right, thank you very much. But we want corner office too, right? I mean, oval, corner, it's all nice. Thank you so much for that, Paul. And we'll see you back here in just about 2 hours.
Hope your day is coming along well. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with the latest weather update. Today was yet another hot summer day here in the central regions, but some regions down south are getting showers, and monsoon front is moving north, which will lead to nationwide showers on Thursday. Monsoon rain will begin in Jeju early tomorrow morning, spread to the southern regions by the afternoon, and eventually make its way up to the central regions by the evening. Jeollanam-do province should get the most precipitation between 20 to 60, and other parts of the country are looking at about 5 to 40, so an umbrella is a must for tomorrow. Other than that, another round of showers is on its way over the weekend, so that will hopefully take care of the dry conditions. Taking a closer look at Thursday's readings, Seoul jumps to 31, Gwangju and Busan to the mid-20s. As for other places, Daejeon and Jeju hit 28, Dokdo and Mount Kumgang make it to 26 and 31. That's your weather for now. Have a wonderful rest of the evening, and we leave you with the international weather.
And that will do it for this edition of ARIRANG News at 8. Thanks for watching.